movie opens with a search party in a forest, where officers and locals are desperately calling out the names of missing people. We then notice a cave marked by a peculiar bell, into which two search dogs arrive. They're unable to find anyone, but they lower their heads and drink from a pool of water. A while later, an officer summons them, but the dogs don't move, with their eyes locked on each other. Upon returning home, the officer gets worried to see the dogs still staring at each other and their bodies completely motionless. A few hours pass by, and he begins to hear growling and high-pitched squeaking noises from the dogs. He rushes to investigate, and his soul nearly escapes his body when he notices the two dogs' bodies merging into a grotesque and unnatural fusion. The scene then cuts to a couple, Tim and Millie, who are having a farewell party with their friends as they prepare to leave the city. Millie has landed a job in a small town, but Tim is clearly unhappy about the relocation. We learn that he's a musician, who hasn't had much success recently, and their relationship is also strained. During the party, Tim's friends mention that they are planning an important tour and need a guitarist. This sparks excitement in Tim, but he worries as it also means frequent trips back to the city, which is stressful. Regardless, he accepts the offer and is willing to travel, even though he doesn't know how to drive. Later, Tim is giving a farewell speech when suddenly, Millie shocks him by dropping to one knee with an invisible ring, and asking him to spend the rest of his life with her. Tim initially thinks it's a joke, and hesitates for a long moment before finally saying yes, which is really awkward. That night, Millie is still upset by his reaction, but he apologizes and reassures her that he truly loves her. She then tries to get intimate, but Tim refuses, saying he's too drunk and just wants to rest. In the next scene, we see the couple finally settling into their new home, which is located deep in the woods. Millie then heads to her new job, where we learn that she's a teacher at the local school. She meets a fellow teacher, Jamie, who turns out to be friendly and kind. Millie learns that Jamie lives near her new home, making them neighbors. Here, he mentions that the woods and trails around the area are amazing, and urges her to explore. The next morning, Tim and Millie set out to explore the woods and follow a marked trail. But the trail ends sooner than expected, which leaves them disappointed. Tim then discovers a hidden path covered in thick branches and bushes, and suggests they explore it. Although Millie is reluctant at first, she eventually agrees, and we notice small, strange bells along the way. Deep into the woods, a heavy storm begins, and they end up losing their track. Tim tries to use his phone's compass, but he doesn't know how it works, and they become completely disoriented. And then all of a sudden,
This looks right, come on!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Millie tries to help, but they both end up falling into a dark cave below. Afterward, the couple observes the surroundings, and we realize by the huge bell that it's the same place the dogs found at the beginning of the movie. Millie finds the place very creepy, and suggests they should leave, but Tim insists on staying till the storm is over. Soon, the couple gets very thirsty, and ends up drinking from a nearby pool of water. Tim then lights a fire using some old wood he found, and manages to keep them warm, before they eventually fall asleep. Shockingly, the next morning, when the couple wakes up, they're horrified to find their legs attached together, as if bound by a strong glue. They struggle to separate, and eventually manage to pull apart after enduring immense pain and tearing off their skin. Despite the bizarre ordeal, the couple barely dwells on it, and finally leaves the cave, before breathing a sigh of relief. Upon returning home, Millie asks Tim for a massage since she's sore from sleeping in the cave. He agrees and touches her gently at first, but suddenly his hands grow intense. A strange, overwhelming force seems to drive him, and he clenches his hands strongly. This causes Millie to get hurt, so she slaps his hand and finally snaps him out of it. She wonders what's wrong with him, so Tim quickly apologizes, saying he doesn't understand what just happened, and maybe he's just exhausted. Next, Millie decides to go to town to buy some groceries, while Tim heads to the shower. While Millie is driving off, Tim is suddenly racked by brutal seizures. His body convulses violently, and is dragged in whichever direction Millie moves, as if an invisible force has bound every fiber of him to her. The force causes the poor man excruciating pain that leaves him gasping and helpless. In the next scene, Tim goes to see a doctor and explains the night in the cave, along with his bizarre experiences this morning. The doctor concludes that it may just be anxiety from being in an unfamiliar place with new people. He prescribes a muscle relaxant pill so that even if Tim's mind panics, his body will remain calm. The doctor also mentions that they were fortunate to have survived, noting that a couple went missing in the same area recently, but were never found despite a large search. Upon returning home, an intrigued Tim searches the internet for news about the missing couple, and discovers that they also had recently moved into this area. He finds an article, and even digs through their social media for pictures. Tim also shows this to Millie, and they both feel bad for the missing couple, and wonder what may have happened to them. However, their conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door, and it turns out to be Jamie. Millie excitedly introduces him to Tim, and Jamie hands them a bottle of wine to officially welcome them to the neighborhood. Millie kindly invites him in, and recounts their recent unsettling experience in the woods, while Tim mentions the bells made him feel like it's a cult symbol. Jamie shockingly reveals that there was once a chapel there, run by a group of hippies who eventually thinned out. He then compliments the food, but Millie reveals that it was actually Tim who cooks, and in return, she drives him everywhere. Tim complains that he feels trapped here, since he can't even get to the train station unless it fits her schedule. This sparks a minor argument between them, but Jamie calms the situation by noting that they complete each other. After the guest leaves, Tim feels a strong attraction toward Millie and begins kissing her passionately. But something bizarre happens when their lips begin to stick together. Millie thinks he bit her, and Tim tries to explain how he has been feeling unnervingly strange recently, but an enraged Millie thinks it's just another excuse to avoid intimacy. The next morning, Tim gets ready to leave for the city, where he has a rehearsal for the band. Millie drives him to the train station, and urges him to stay in town tonight and enjoy time with his friends instead of feeling trapped here. She says that maybe some space will do them good. But as Millie drives away, Tim suddenly has difficulty breathing and his face becomes red. He tries to resist, and even takes a muscle relaxant, but it has no effect, and the train eventually passes, leaving him sick and helpless. Meanwhile, Millie is at school, where she notices a drawing by one of her students that sends a shiver down her spine. It shows two dogs grotesquely fused together. Shortly after, she looks out the window, and is shocked to see Tim there, looking very distressed. She rushes to him, and immediately takes him to the bathroom, demanding to know what he's doing there, but Tim claims he just needed to see her and begins kissing her with fierce passion. The couple retreats to a toilet stall, where they begin making love. After they're done, the two try to separate, but are horrified to find their genitals stuck together. They struggle desperately to break free, and the situation turns even worse when a child arrives right outside the stall. After the child walks away, Millie places her hand over Tim's mouth.
I'm sorry.
Just then, Jamie's voice is heard outside, so Millie nervously exits the stall while Tim hides. Jamie is with the child from earlier, and asks Millie what she's doing here, since it's a boys' bathroom. He simply tells her to use the staff restroom from now on. While he's leaving, he spots Tim's legs in the toilet stall but doesn't say anything. Upon returning home, Millie is outraged at Tim, and accuses him of almost getting her fired or, worse, arrested. The poor guy apologizes, explaining that something is wrong with him, and that his brain and body aren't communicating. But Millie believes he's deliberately sabotaging her career, because he doesn't have one of his own, which deeply hurts his feelings. Afterward, Millie arrives at Jamie's house, where she apologizes to him for what happened at school. He assures her it's fine, but Millie suddenly begins to break down in tears, so he kindly invites her inside. Once inside, Millie notices a picture of Jamie with a man, who was probably his partner. She then confesses that her relationship with Tim has been strained lately, although they still love each other. Jamie also opens up about his own relationship, and reveals that he went through this phase once, and actually left. He thought freedom would make him happy, but he eventually realized that he was empty without his partner. Millie notices that Jamie is still wearing his wedding ring, and he mentions that he wants to show her his wedding video. But just then, she suddenly spots Tim lurking outside, so she excuses herself and leaves. Tim apologizes for his behavior, but she doesn't say anything and just grips his hand tightly. That night, Tim opens his laptop and looks at the picture of the missing couple once again. He wants to find where their last pic was taken, and after some digging, he's shocked to realize that it's the same trail they had taken only a few days ago. He recognizes the peculiar bell looming behind the couple, but before he can dig any deeper, the internet connection suddenly cuts off. Just then, a loud thud echoes nearby, which startles Tim. He rushes over to investigate, and is horrified to find Millie suspended in the air in a trance, so Tim quickly opens the door, and Millie collapses on him and continues convulsing. Panicked, Tim ends up slapping her, after which she finally jolts awake. Afterward, the couple discusses their bizarre incident, and Millie insists it was probably just a seizure or a sleepwalking episode. But Tim disagrees, and he points out that ever since they went to that cave, strange things have been happening, and their bodies are always trying to fuse. He also tells her about the missing couple, who vanished along the same trail they had taken. Tim declares that he'll head to the cave first thing tomorrow morning to investigate, but Millie dismisses his theories. She reminds him that her parents are coming this Sunday, and bluntly says she doesn't want him around them, which really hurts Tim's feelings. That night, the couple sleeps in separate rooms. But around midnight, Tim suddenly wakes to find himself being dragged down the hallway by an invisible force. The poor guy panics and fights with all his strength, but it's useless. And then suddenly, Millie's door creaks open on its own. Millie is also pulled out into the hallway. Both of them scream in terror as their hands are fused together, while they experience unbearable pain. In the chaos, Tim remembers the muscle relaxants, which they manage to grab from the drawer and swallow. The two struggle to separate their hands, and the drug's effect stops the fusion process for now, but both of them collapse into unconsciousness. The next morning, Tim wakes up tied to a chair with duct tape, and realizes that his and Millie's arms are still fused together. Millie tells him they have to separate before the pills wear off, and gives him alcohol to dull the pain. She then explains how she plans to slice through their skin with a chainsaw and bandage the wounds afterward. Tim is horrified by the thought, but he soon realizes that if they don't split up now, it will only get worse. Millie then grabs the chainsaw, drives it into their joined flesh and brutally cuts through as they both scream in unbearable agony. Later, we see the two of them lying exhausted with their arms wrapped tightly in bandages. Tim checks the medication bottle and realizes there are only 2 pills left. And so, Millie thus insists they need to get to a hospital before their bodies start fusing again. Tim argues that the issue is much deeper than that, but when she refuses to listen, he has no choice but to agree. Here Millie remembers she left her keys at Jamie's place, and decides to go retrieve them quickly. But as soon as she leaves, Tim returns to the house, grabs a flashlight and a rope, and heads off toward the cave. Meanwhile, Millie arrives at Jamie's house, where the same peculiar bell hangs in front of the door. She tries calling him, but there's no answer, and soon she hears noises coming from inside the house, only to realize they're just coming from a TV. Millie watches footage playing that shows the wedding of 2 men in a chapel, but neither of them is Jamie. But then, she watches in disbelief as the tape shifts to a dark ritual, showing the men cutting their arms and beginning the terrifying process of fusing. The horrifying truth dawns on her that this whole thing is part of a sinister cult. Just then, Jamie shows up and says it was one of the happiest days of their lives and the beginning of something wonderful. In another scene, Tim is investigating the cave when he comes across a painting symbolizing the fusion ritual, and realizes this place was once the chapel. Suddenly, he collapses to the floor and is stuck there, while a terrifying fused creature approaches him. Elsewhere, Jamie tries to convince Millie that this is a great gift, claiming they literally bring couples together to become whole, and deepen their connection. Millie insists that she doesn't want it, but Jamie coldly tells her it's already happening, and she won't like the alternative. Returning to the cave, the creature edges closer to Tim, and he's horrified to find that it is the grotesque fusion of the missing couple. It becomes clear that the couples who resist fusing are trapped in this horrific form, forced to spend the rest of their lives here. Meanwhile, Jamie is still trying to convince Millie to join the cult, and even goes so far as to cut her wrist to speed up the ritual, so Millie strikes him before running away from the house. Elsewhere, Tim is almost attacked by the creature, but he manages to fight it off with his knife, and escape the cave using his rope. Afterward, the couple arrives home at the same time, and the moment they see each other, they are pulled together by the magnetic force. Tim then claims he knows how to stop it, so he pulls out an invisible ring and proposes to her. Here he apologizes for taking so long to realize, and tearfully confesses that he's nothing without her and that he loves her more than anything. His words really touch Millie, but Tim suddenly asks her to close her eyes, and prepares to slit his throat. He insists that the only way to stop this is to end his life before they are both fused and trapped forever. Millie frantically tries to stop him, and Tim is terrified as he notices Millie's bloody wrist, so Tim desperately tries to help her. Realizing that she's going to die, she pleads with him to save himself, and loses consciousness, while a devastated Tim breaks down in tears. But sometime later, Millie shockingly wakes up in the house, and Tim reveals that it was the only way to stop the bleeding. Her heart shatters when she realizes they are now fused again. But Tim seems to be content, and pulls out Millie's favorite album, after which the couple begins to dance together. They undress, and Millie asks Tim if he truly wants this, to which he confirms. In an unexpected twist, the couple finally gives themselves fully to the transformation, and ends up merging into a single unified being. In the final scene, a car pulls up outside the house, and Millie's parents step out. They make their way to the front door, where the same peculiar bell is seen hanging ominously. Here, they are greeted by a seemingly normal, androgynous person, suggesting that Millie and Tim had completed the fusion process. Thus, we reach the end of this movie. Thanks for watching. If you like the movie, support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next movie. Goodbye.